The ongoing discourse surrounding late-night television, particularly the trajectory of Jimmy Kimmel's show, reflects a broader cultural shift that has left traditional comedy struggling to maintain relevance. The landscape of late-night TV, once a unifying force that brought laughter to diverse audiences, has become a battleground for political agendas, with hosts like Kimmel increasingly alienating viewers by prioritizing ideological conformity over entertainment. This phenomenon is vividly illustrated in a recent episode of Joe Rogan's podcast, where the comedian and UFC commentator delivered a scathing critique of Kimmel's approach, exposing the cracks in the late-night model and highlighting the consequences of abandoning comedy's core purpose. The discussion begins with a notable exchange involving Elon Musk, who has become a lightning rod for controversy due to his unfiltered commentary. Musk's playful jab about pronouns, declaring his as prosecute/Fauci, sparked a response from Kimmel, who retorted on social media that Musk's pronouns were ass and hole. The quip, intended as a sharp comeback, was initially seen as humorous by some, but it quickly drew criticism from progressive circles who deemed it transphobic. This incident encapsulates the tightrope Kimmel walks, attempting to score points with a politically sensitive audience while risking backlash from the very group he seeks to appease. The reaction underscores a broader trend where humor, particularly around sensitive topics like identity, is increasingly policed, leaving comedians like Kimmel caught in a cycle of performative virtue signaling that often backfires. Rogan, in his podcast, seized on this moment to highlight Kimmel's hypocrisy. He argued that Kimmel's attempt to align himself with progressive ideals is undermined by his past, notably his use of blackface in sketches from earlier in his career. These performances, including portrayals of Snoop Dogg and Oprah Winfrey, were met with significant backlash when they resurfaced in 2020. Kimmel issued an apology, but Rogan contends that this incident pushed Kimmel to double down on his progressive stance, not out of genuine conviction but as a defensive maneuver to salvage his reputation. This pivot, according to Rogan, has transformed Kimmel's show from a platform for comedy into a vehicle for partisan rants, alienating viewers who once tuned in for lighthearted entertainment. The decline of late-night television, as Rogan and others see it, is not just a matter of changing tastes but a failure to adapt to a shifting cultural landscape. Once a staple of American entertainment, shows like Jimmy Kimmel Live, The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and The Daily Show have seen their ratings plummet. Kimmel's show, for instance, averaged 1.5 million viewers overall last week, with a mere 236,000 in the key demographic, a far cry from the numbers commanded by predecessors like Johnny Carson or even Jon Stewart, whose Daily Show once drew over 2 million viewers. Seth Meyers fares even worse, with under 800,000 viewers, while Fallon's Tonight Show has dropped from 2.3 million in 2017 to 2018 to 1.3 million today. In contrast, cable shows like Greg Gutfeld's, which require a paid subscription, consistently outperform these network giants, pulling in more than double Meyers' numbers. The financial implications are stark. Producing a show like Kimmel's costs tens of millions annually, potentially approaching $100 million, yet the return in viewership is dismal. Compare this to independent creators like Tucker Carlson, whose videos cost little to produce yet rival or surpass Kimmel's audience. This disparity highlights a fundamental flaw in the late-night model, a reliance on outdated formats, expensive production, and a disconnect from the audience's desire for authenticity. Rogan argues that Kimmel and his peers have abandoned the essence of comedy, making people laugh, in favor of delivering scripted, politically charged monologues that feel more like lectures than jokes. The artificiality of the setup, with teleprompters, applause signs, and warm-up acts coaching audiences to clap on cue, only compounds the problem. What was once a spontaneous, shared cultural experience has become a manufactured product, tailored to appease a specific ideological bubble rather than entertain the masses. Kimmel's transformation is particularly striking when viewed against his earlier career. As co-host of The Man Show from 1999 to 2004, Kimmel leaned into a brand of crude, irreverent humor that was unapologetically juvenile. The show, however, never achieved significant cultural impact, earning a mediocre 6 out of 10 rating and fading into obscurity. Rogan points out that Kimmel's rise to prominence had less to do with comedic talent and more to do with his ability to navigate Hollywood's power structures. By aligning himself with the industry's elite and adopting their values, Kimmel secured his spot as a late-night host, but at the cost of authenticity. His monologues, once filled with playful jabs, now feel like carefully crafted talking points designed to signal virtue rather than provoke laughter. This shift is evident in Kimmel's reaction to Donald Trump's electoral victories. Following Trump's win, Kimmel delivered a somber monologue, lamenting the outcome as a terrible night for women, children, immigrants, healthcare, the climate, and international alliances. To Rogan and others, this was less about genuine concern and more about pandering to a progressive audience while reinforcing a narrative that paints Trump supporters as morally deficient. The tears Kimmel shed were not for the marginalized, as he claimed, but for the collapse of a worldview he had invested in heavily. This performative outrage, Rogan argues, is emblematic of late night's broader decline, a move away from comedy toward activism disguised as entertainment. The hypocrisy Rogan highlights is further amplified by Kimmel's role as a recurring host of the Academy Awards. Despite his history of controversial sketches, Kimmel is celebrated by Hollywood's elite, who overlook his past while holding others to a different standard. This double standard, as conservative commentator Megyn Kelly points out, is a hallmark of the industry's selective outrage. When conservatives make controversial remarks, they face swift condemnation and cancellation, but when a progressive like Kimmel offends, the backlash is muted, dismissed as a misunderstanding or an artifact of a less sensitive era. This disparity fuels resentment among viewers who see late-night hosts as part of a privileged class, insulated from the consequences of their actions while preaching to the public. The decline of late-night comedy is not just a matter of ratings but a loss of purpose. Historically, shows like Johnny Carson's Tonight Show succeeded because they offered a respite from the day's stresses, bringing together audiences from all walks of life through humor. Carson's ability to connect with guests and audiences alike, often through spontaneous moments like playfully messing up a guest's hair, created a sense of shared joy. Today's hosts, by contrast, seem more interested in signaling their moral superiority than fostering connection. Their monologues are less about punchlines and more about pushing a narrative, alienating viewers who don't share their politics. The result is a fragmented audience, with many turning to platforms like podcasts, where voices like Rogan's offer unfiltered, authentic conversations that resonate more deeply than polished late-night routines. Rogan's critique extends beyond Kimmel to the broader ecosystem of late-night television. Shows like The Daily Show and Late Night with Seth Meyers have seen similar declines, with The Daily Show's viewership dropping to 366,000 from Stewart's peak of over 2 million. The problem, Rogan argues, is not a lack of creativity but a deliberate choice to prioritize ideology over entertainment. Writers craft jokes to fit a predetermined agenda, and hosts deliver them with the expectation that audiences will applaud on cue, not because the material is genuinely funny. This formulaic approach has turned late night into a shadow of its former self, a platform that lectures rather than entertains. Kimmel's attempt to mock Musk over pronouns is a case study in this dynamic. The joke, meant to align Kimmel with progressive values, instead exposed his disconnect from the audience he was trying to court. The backlash from trans activists, who called the joke insensitive, revealed the impossible standards Kimmel faces. No matter how hard he tries to signal his allegiance, he can never fully satisfy the demands of an increasingly rigid ideological framework. Rogan, by contrast, thrives because he rejects this framework entirely, speaking directly to his audience without the filter of corporate approval. The broader implications of this shift are profound. Late-night television, once a cultural institution, is losing its grip on relevance because it has forgotten its purpose. Comedy should unite, not divide, but hosts like Kimmel have chosen to cater to a narrow, elite audience rather than the broader public. The result is a self-inflicted wound, declining ratings, shrinking cultural impact, and a growing disconnect from the everyday Americans who once made these shows must-watch TV. Meanwhile, platforms like Rogan's podcast continue to gain traction, not because they avoid controversy but because they embrace authenticity, offering a raw, unscripted alternative to the sanitized world of late night. Kimmel's trajectory serves as a cautionary tale for entertainers who trade their craft for political points. His show, like those of his peers, is on life support, with networks likely to pull the plug if ratings continue to slide. The irony is that Kimmel's decline is entirely of his own making. By abandoning comedy for activism, he has alienated the very audience that once sustained him. Viewers don't want to be preached to, they want to laugh, to feel connected, to escape the divisiveness of the world for a few moments each night. Until late-night hosts rediscover that mission, their shows will continue to fade into obscurity, replaced by voices that prioritize truth and humor over agenda and applause.